Hey there, Ms. Feil here. Here's our next reading for The Danger and Power of a Single Story. This one is The Big One, Serialized by Tom Vance. This one's from 2018. Do you have 2 weeks of food, water, and other essentials to survive after a catastrophic earthquake or other disaster? Most Pacific Northwesters, that's us here, mean well, but we aren't prepared. In Portland, on the Washington coast, in British Columbia, and now in Bellingham, writers tackled the big one in serial form to motivate people into action. The big one being the big earthquake that will eventually happen. In the Bellingham case, a family foundation, a writer, a newspaper settled on fiction storytelling as the most effective format to break through complacency. Because we all know that we should have emergency kits in case there's something emergent happens, but most of us just don't do it because we can't afford it, don't feel like going through the effort, whatever. So they've decided to use fiction or non-true story to make people realize. Okay, the writer's name is John Stark. He stepped away from a long career as a newspaper reporter a few years ago. Stark was enjoying retirement in Bellingham when the phone rang last spring with a freelance offer. In other words, he's not really employed, but someone they're going to pay him to do something. A local foundation wanted to commission a writer to imagine realistically what life would be like in Bellingham during and after the big one, a roughly magnitude 9.0 earthquake arising from the offshore Cascadia fault zone. That's where one earth plate is riding over the other, and there's pressure all the time. And every once in a while, there's a slip. And when that slip happens, there's a huge earthquake, and normally a tsunami follows. So it would be extremely destructive to the entire coastline. The project turned into a 27 chapter novella, short novel, serialized, so it was printed each week, over the past month in the Bellingham Herald. Actually, I had a first draft where we had looting at the supermarket and guns drawn and shooting and all that kind of thing, Stark said. It was a lot of fun to write. I thought it was pretty exciting, but when it was all said and done, I realized it was not that realistic. It's also not constructive to lead people to expect that kind of thing. Stark revised that scene and others after consulting earthquake and disaster experts. They told him emergencies tend to bring out the best in most people. Stark said that hurricanes that swamped Texas and Puerto Rico, California wildfires, and damaging earthquakes in Mexico happened while he was writing. They helped inform his story. For example, a scene where neighbors banding together to fight a house fire. The fictional characters also spend a lot of time scrounging for food because disaster relief is slow to arrive, and that is likely to happen in real life. Usually after an earthquake or something like that, normally roads are affected, so it's very difficult to get help and relief in from other places because you can't get there other by aircraft. And if you're flying something other than a helicopter, you really can't land it because you don't have a place to land an airplane. You're not going to do really teeny airplanes. The River Styx Foundation in Bellingham conceived and funded Imagining the Big One project at the instigation of its president, businessman Jim Swift. Foundation director Heather Flaherty said that they were concerned by the lack of preparedness and wanted a novel way to engage people. It seems like the facts are not working, she said, or they're working to a point. But how do we get people to actually take action? How do we draw people in a way that's interesting and fun, and we educate almost at a head fake? So in other words, we're doing the education without letting them know we're doing the education. You're learning through entertainment. Flaherty and Stark said they're delighted with the response to the storytelling approach. Readers emailed and commented that they were inspired to take steps to improve their emergency kits. Independently, so at the same time but differently, Grays Harbor County Deputy Chief Emergency Management Chuck Wallace started writing a similar story of misfortune set in his area. He has his first 2 chapters of what he envisions as a 6 chapter online story project. Titled Moments of Misfortune, each new installment comes out first in the department's digital newsletter with a new chapter every 2 months. The tale includes multiple earthquakes, a school collapse, and a tsunami. People pay attention to the stories, Wallace said. When you give them the story, they're not playing on their phone. It kind of brings things home. You're not telling them the world's going to end today. You're just saying that it could happen. We remember stories way more than we remember factoids or facts, Flaherty said. That being very true. A listing of facts is something you're not going to remember, whereas a story that you enjoy and pulls you in and is emotional, you will remember. You could say that there's a burgeoning literary tradition here, so a beginning, growing. The online magazine Motherboard used the term reported science fiction in 2016 to introduce a 5-part series about the aftermath of a Cascadia megaquake in Portland. CBC Radio Vancouver took the same premise to Southwest British Columbia for a limited run podcast. All of these projects fold practical tips that you may have been ignoring into their stories or in news you can use sidebars. So a great way to use a story to actually make people act. So the power of a single story. Okay, so we will meet next time for our next reading.